Welcome to Diminishing Returns! This week we are looking at one of my personal favourites, Beavis and Butt-Head Do America, as well as taking pit stops along pretty much everything Mike Judge has done in his career. It's all very good stuff. Without further ado, I must warn you that this episode features an astonishing amount of admittedly very mild spoilers. Spoilers for Joe's Apartment, Daria, Idiocracy, South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, King of the Hill, Ali G in da House, The SpongeBob SquarePants Movie, A Goofy Movie, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, The Simpsons, Rugrats Go Wild, Cartoon All-Stars to the Rescue, Planet of the Apes, Saboteur, X-Men, GoldenEye, Live and Let Die, Ghostbusters 2, Men in Black 2, Weekend at Bernie's 2, Beavis and Butt-Head, and Beavis and Butt-Head Do America. Enjoy. I don't know how to intro it. Beavis and Butt-Head. that one's the principal getting upset.
That was pretty good.
That was good, yeah.
There's going to be a lot of that in this episode. Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns. We are looking at a bit of an odd pick this week. I was going to say classic, I don't know if it quite counts, the 1996 animated comedy feature film spin-off of a TV series, Beavis and Butt-Head Do America, which
Yay.
is, I've been pushing for us to do this, I'm not really sure.
So why have you been pushing for us to do this? You've always spoken very highly of this film.
Oh, it's great. I love it.
Okay.
I love Mike Judge. I think he's excellent.
Can I ask, Calvin, had you seen this film before?
I've never seen this. I've never seen any Beavis and Butt-Head anything before.
Interesting. Okay,
What-
this is going to be interesting.
What about yourself?
Yeah, I like it. I really like it. I mean, I'm not quite old enough to remember Beavis and Butt-Head the first time round, but mostly because we never had any kind of MTV or anything like that. We just had the old 4 channels. But the film is basically my main awareness of Beavis and Butt-Head. I have seen episodes since, but that was kind of my introduction to Beavis and Butt-Head. And when that film was released, I was 12 years old. I was right in that demographic. I don't think I saw it at the cinema, but I'll have seen it on video shortly after. I was the right age for it. I really like it. I watched it again just the other day, and I really still like it. I think I won't go into too much detail, but yes, I'm a big fan. And I like what they did with it to convert it from the short format to the long.
Yeah, perhaps you could explain to me what Beavis and Butt-Head was and how it started, because I've never seen a short, apart from what I watched like in preparation for this. I watched a couple on YouTube. From what I understand from the limited research I've done, is that they were basically animated shorts that played in between music videos, was it?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Mike Judge went and made a handful of short films just for the hell of it. He was very keen just to get out and make stuff and get involved in some animation film festival, I think, that was passing through his area at one point, and he ended up making this thing called Frog Baseball, among a few others, but that's the most famous one, which was just these 2 kids. I don't think they're named in it, but they're Beavis and Butt-Head, and they just walk along, see a frog, and then just start like smacking it with a baseball bat and playing baseball with it, and that's basically all there is to it. It's not particularly great, it's not particularly clever or funny, but it's very raw and anarchic, and I'm not sure of the details exactly, but that made its way to some people at MTV, and they were doing testing with it, among other things, and apparently it tested like insanely popularly with their demographic that they were trying to appeal to. It was to the point that the people in their focus groups were actually asking them if they could buy a copy to take home at the end of the day, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, was like a huge ad. Like that meant big bucks to the execs at the time, and so they basically ended up giving this guy a TV series who'd, didn't really have any experience doing any of this stuff on any real level.
He wasn't even an experienced animator, was he?
No, not really, no.
But it says a lot about what was happening at the time, I think, in terms of TV and the way TV was developing. And like now, 25 years later, it's the internet provides all this stuff so rapidly. I mean, this is the equivalent of something going viral. You know, it just caught
absolutely
unexpectedly.
It's the same thing that happened to South Park
by the right people, and it's kind of like how South Park started. I know we'll be coming back to that in a bit.
Yeah.
But it was just like, you know, when something just catches, we're not quite sure why. It just comes out of nowhere. But in this case, it was TV executives who found it somehow. Yeah,
like I say, I think it might have gone through a few little film festivals and things to get there in the first place. In fact, I think he might have... My understanding is Mike Judge just sent VHS tapes out in the post to all these all these companies like MTV and places like that, which was something you could do a lot more easily back then. And he drew little doodles of like weird redneck characters on the label instead of just writing Frog Baseball or whatever, which he says he's convinced that's why people actually watched his tapes instead of the hundreds of other tapes that were no doubt dumped in their laps at the time. But yeah, we're talking like 1992, 1993, 1994, this was all happening. So, in fact, no, this must have been about 1992. So, really, what adult animation is there on Western screens at this time? There's rudimentary early The Simpsons. Bart Mania is taking the world by storm. And that's kind of it. So I can completely see how people lapped up an opportunity for something else. And something a bit less wholesome than The Simpsons certainly was. I mean, The Simpsons was quite subversive for its day, but it's still very a peaceful, loving family for the most part, other than when Homer like strangles his kid and stuff. Whereas this was these two vile teenage boys, you know, just harming frogs, talking about sex and things, just brain dead idiots, setting fires to things. That was a big controversy. There was concern that they were like encouraging children to go on arson sprees and things. I mean, there was quite a backlash against Beavis and Butt-Head actually from parents when it came out, but
that's when you know you've made it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think South Park came shortly afterwards, and everyone just sort of turned their attention to that instead.
Well, I think even outside of animation aimed at adults, like especially Nickelodeon, and I know that Nickelodeon and MTV, I'm not sure if they were at the time, but now they're both under the Viacom, the Paramount umbrella. But even on that channel in the early 90s, there was a real shift towards really anarchic, more auto-driven animated content, like the Ren and Stimpy show and Rocko's Modern Life and Hey Arnold, you know, things that weren't necessarily the traditional wholesome format that parents wanted their kids to watch. It was a lot more slapstick and a bit more aimless, I would say.
Yeah. And anyway, Beavis and Butt-Head started in 1993, and it was intended as just content that they could put in amongst the music videos and in amongst the what was his name? Kurt Loder? Is that the guy, Alan?
I don't know.
Whoever it was who presented MTV News, who's like a big deal to people of a certain age in America. I think he was called Kurt Loder, but I don't know. Yeah, they just had these 5-minute episodes that could be cut in amongst there. Other than when they did a double-length episode or something like that. Most of the episodes were just 5-minute short stories, basically. Just 5-minute shorts about Beavis and Butt-Head doing something, usually next to nothing. You know, plots would be Beavis and Butt-Head buy food from a vending machine or something like that, which I realise Alan got a feature film pitch out of last week, but... But, I mean, it was stuff like that, or, you know, Beavis and Butt-Head wash a car, or things like that. That was generally the extent of it. And then there'd also be about 5 minutes of them just watching music videos and talking over the top, which my understanding was basically just Mike Judge going into a sound booth and improvising, and just, you know, kind of like Mystery Science Theatre, but not as difficult to watch because they were, you know, editing the best comments down into a few minutes.
I love Mystery Science Theatre.
Oh, I can't stand it. But no, I mean, it's very similar. It was just, and the benefit of them doing it that way was that obviously they didn't have to do very much animation, and they could repeat a lot of basic animation of just the two of them sat on a sofa in front of a TV. So they were getting, 5 minutes of content from music videos that MTV already was cleared to watch.
Because you see on the bits where they're talking over it, like you'll cut to them like watching something and maybe making some small movements. Then it cuts to the music video for whenever they're talking. So they don't even have to bother animating like lip sync or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's literally just, he'll go into a sound booth and we could just bang out all these episodes in one day.
There's one particular animation of Butthead slapping Beavis a few times, which was repeated at like almost every segment. Just that was the most repeated bit, I think. But yeah, I mean, that was the bulk of it. They were just little idents, essentially, just to bulk up the MTV running time, let them bring things up to the end of the hour so another show could start.
And it works in the context of a music channel where it's like, we're showing music videos, we're holding people's attention for 3 minutes at a time, and so it makes sense in that context, and it works with the format. It works.
But then, the amount of, like we were talking about before, it really did penetrate the cultural zeitgeist, I guess. It really took hold and was a big part of pop culture. So it just made financial sense for them to make a film at the time, even though I'm sure lots of people were against the idea, because, how are we going to turn these 5-minute plots into a full 90-minute runtime? It's just not going to work. I'm sure there was lots of people decrying the idea, but Mike Judge agreed to do it because he was sick of it and desperate to get out of his contract with MTV, and I believe they cut him some sort of deal whereby he could do the movie in exchange for 2 fewer seasons on his contract or something like that. There was some kind of deal that they cut that meant that he got out of his contract sooner, which is why he turned his attention to the film. But the film, if you ask me, I think it's a real labour of love, and it's not just a quick cash-in job that it could have very easily been. I think it's clear that the people involved put a lot of time and effort into it.
Can we just talk briefly about, in terms of making it into a film, I looked into MTV Films, and from what I can tell, the only one they did before this was Joe's Apartment.
I've never heard of that. Do you know what it is?
Yes, I have heard of it, although I've never seen it. And it was based on, it's Jerry O'Connell, isn't it? So that's how you know it's going to be good. It was based on a short film that was made for MTV.
Right. It's not animation.
So there's cockroaches in it that are, I think they're animated. I don't think I've seen it all. I think I've just seen clips of it. I might have seen it some time ago. But yeah, it's just a silly little comedy. But anyway, that's the only thing I can tell that was released before this in terms of MTV Films. And that was released in 1996 as well. So presumably, because Beavis and Butt-Head is animated, it was probably greenlit before that. Maybe. It's hard to tell. But definitely in the terms of that first wave, and perhaps the success of Beavis and Butt-Head led to us getting things like Jackass movie, I suppose.
Yeah, no doubt.
But yeah, it's I mean, I'm looking now at a list of MTV Films productions, and they're all like co-productions with other companies, obviously. But like they've got things like Election in 1999.
Oh, really?
And, weird things like that, which you wouldn't necessarily expect from them. But they'd made a bit of money, so they were like, "Oh, right, we could
invest."
And then you've got the things you expect, like the Jackass and a few of the others. The tie-in things that have their own shows.
I know that Beavis and Butt-Head wasn't the only animation on there at the time. They had an animation block that was quite experimental at the time. That Aeon Flux, if you're familiar with that.
Oh, wow.
On there, some other things.
They made that into a film with Charlize Theron, didn't they?
Yeah. I don't know if MTV were involved in the film.
They were, yes.
Were they? Yeah. Huh. Well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, that was something that was going on MTV at roughly that time, and I know it's meant to be very good. I've only seen the film, which isn't, but... I mean, my understanding is MTV was just a bit of a playground, to be honest. It's similar to BBC Three when it launched in this country before it got watered down and became less of a dumping ground. Because I think when something is just such a low stakes arena to play in and no one really cares, you get all these kinds of weird innovative things being shoved on there and coming out of it. I mean, what I think's clear is I think Mike Judge is an incredibly talented man, and they were just very lucky to basically snap him up, be the people to discover him, essentially. Where I stand with Beavis and Butt-Head, because I've not really spoken about this yet, the film was my first introduction to them beyond, I knew that they were these cartoon characters, but the first thing I ever really saw of them was the film. I think I just happened to be watching TV late at night, and it was on BBC Two or something at like 2 a.m, and I just happened to catch it. But I've since gone back and watched all of the show and everything, and it's a weird one, really, because the show isn't great. And Mike Judge himself, like, openly really doesn't like a lot of the show, to the point that he refuses to let about a third of it be released on DVD because he's so embarrassed by it. So when you try and buy these DVD sets, they're called the Mike Judge collection, and they're about 2/3 of the show that was produced. The third that Mike Judge likes, the third he isn't like embarrassed by, to the point that he refuses to let it out there. And what little of the music videos they were able to clear the licenses for. And that's something that's worth mentioning. The licensing issues with those old episodes is a nightmare, and I think that's a big part of why it isn't repeated and shown on other channels like incessantly, because although they're only like little 5, 10, 15-minute episodes, they generally add up to a solid 15-minute block or half-hour block of programming. It'd be very easy to slot them into a normal TV schedule. But there are a handful of episodes that are very good. It's just most of the episodes don't really have a storyline because they're about 5 minutes long. So it will be beginning and middle and no ending.
They were just churning them out, weren't they? Yeah, and it was just sort of like, okay, and it did develop as it went on, like. Because you got more characters that had a bit more rounded, and Beavis and Butt-Head themselves became a little bit more kind of more likable, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah,
they were less violent. But that was. But I think it just sort of that's what happens with any show, isn't it? Things develop and they change slightly, and I think he sort of honed his craft a little bit more as he went along.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Speaking of other characters, though, are you both familiar with Daria?
I'm aware of it, but I've never seen it. Is she in the film?
No. Daria's a character in Beavis and Butt-Head. I don't think she's in the film, but Daria is a spin-off from Beavis and Butt-Head. For whatever reason, MTV greenlit this spin-off. It doesn't have any real crossover other than the main character being this sort of sarcastic, intelligent young woman who's pissed off with everything. She would often pop up in the old show, and she'd normally be a voice of reason who just sort of say, like, for God's sake, Beavis and Butt-Head, this isn't how this works. You've got to go over there and sign up on that sheet, or just something like that, and they'd go and do it. And my best guess is that someone was trying to get a show commissioned at MTV. They said, right, well, we'll let you do it if you rewrite it so it's about this character from Beavis and Butt-Head. We'll do a spin-off. I get the impression that there's a bit of animosity between both parties, to be honest, because Daria it's one of the most disconnected spin-offs I've ever seen. I think there's like a reference to those boys from my old school in a trailer for Daria.
Well, no, in the first episode, Daria and her family have moved to a new town. And so they're like, oh yeah, we used to live in Highland, now we're here. And that's it.
That is the extent of it. There's no, like, Beavis and Butt-Head never pop up or anything. And then when Beavis and Butt-Head was revived a few years ago, at one point one of them even says, like, oh yeah, whatever happened to that Daria girl? And I think Butt-Head just goes, oh yeah, I think she died. And that's the last of it. And it's like, right.
Well, from what I read, the person who created Daria, as in for Beavis and Butt-Head, the person who drew the character, whatever, they said, oh, can we take this character and like create this spin-off series? And Mike Judge went, yeah, of course, do what you want. So they did, and then it ended up becoming... So I don't know if Mike Judge ever really made any money out of it. I think they just sort of like separate. It was a separate thing. So he was. So maybe that's why.
Well, I tell you what, Daria is quite good.
Yeah.
I've watched it all. To be honest, it's better than Beavis and Butt-Head in terms of overall consistency. It's a nice little angsty teen comedy thing, and I just find it quite ironic because I'm painting very broad strokes here, but my general experience seems to be that people who did like Daria and watch it when they were younger were all girls of a certain age, and people who did like Beavis and Butt-Head and watched it were all boys of a certain age, and there doesn't seem to be much crossover there, so it's a very odd thing that happened, but whatever, you know. I suppose while we're talking about spin-offs, there's a whole load of all but official spin-offs from the show. So Calvin, Tom Anderson in the film, when you watched it, did he remind you of anyone?
Oh, God, it's just clicked now. Yes. It's King of the Hill, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Oh, there goes my pitch. Oh, crap.
well, King of the Hill was just, like, completely and utterly...
Oh, I can't believe I forgot about King of the Hill.
Let's take this guy and do a sitcom about him.
Yeah.
And to the point that if you dig up any of the old... there's some really old pencil test drawings and things of Hank Hill, and he looks a lot closer to Tom Anderson, or whatever his name is. But, you know, I think MTV owned the rights, and Fox were obviously a different network, so they didn't make any sort of official connection between the two.
Of course, yeah.
And then the other one is when King of the Hill was cancelled, he immediately went into production on another show called The Good Family, which is about a hippie. It's basically the opposite of King of the Hill. It's about a really left-wing, progressive, like hippy-dippy family, and it's just the teacher, Mr. What's his name? Mr. Van Driessen? It's just him, and they did the exact same thing, but it didn't work very well that time. It worked a lot better the first time round. So, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of life in what they've been doing here, and I don't know if either of you have seen Idiocracy as well.
Nope.
It's a film he made. I'm quite a big fan of it. It really went under the radar. Fox kind of buried it for whatever reason, but I think it's a solid, entertaining comedy, and it's essentially like what would happen if everyone in the world was Beavis and Butt-Head. It's about a guy who gets frozen and wakes up in the future, and society's dumbed down to the point that he's the smartest man on earth. But anyway, so Beavis and Butt-Head.
Can we talk about the revival series in 2011 before the film?
Sure, yeah. Have you seen any of it?
I've seen a few of them, yeah. And basically, I just want to talk about it now because it's essentially the same as the previous series.
Oh, yeah. They like didn't skip a beat. It's bizarre. They moved to HD widescreen, and they moved to a half-hour time slot, which meant that you generally got 2 episodes stuck together.
But yeah, it just did it as 2 episodes. It wasn't like longer stories.
You know, the same way that things like SpongeBob SquarePants or whatever do that, though. You know, it's not unheard of.
But the one thing I wanted to bring up about it, the main thing I noticed was that because obviously MTV has changed in the years, now instead of sitting there talking about music videos, they sit and they're talking about Jersey Shore and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the major difference that I could see there was the difference between, you know, Mike Judge improvising as like probably going back to his own teenage years of being that kind of scatological humor and just saying swear words because it's funny and things like that. To like now Mike Judge, obviously like a man in his 50s or whatever, who was just watching Jersey Shore and going, look at this shit, look what they're doing. But then through the voices of Beavis and Butt-Head, and they just come across as too satirical and too clever. And like when Beavis and Butt-Head are smarter than the things that the MTV are showing, it changes the tone of it completely. It was funny, but it didn't quite fit the form anymore.
I think it was interesting that they were that innovative, though, because I think they did a few music videos, but they also did, like you say, the reality nonsense on MTV. In at least one episode, they did a movie review section, and they had Beavis and Butt-Head reviewing The Human Centipede.
No way!
Yeah, just watching footage from the film and stuff.
Oh, that sounds fun.
So it was quite a nice way of rolling with the times, I thought. But I know what you're saying. It was a lot less rough and ready, but I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a problem.
I found it really funny, but I think it was just a change in the terms of like Mike Judge couldn't bring himself down to that level to just sort of be jokey with it. He was just like, it was Beavis and Butt-Head taking the piss out of like Snooki and stuff like that. So it worked, but yeah.
But I mean, I think the story part of the episodes, the bulk of the show, I would say that revival season is the best season of the show by a mile. And I know that's not a massively popular opinion amongst fans of Beavis and Butt-Head, but I think it's clear as day that Mike Judge had learned a lot on his time on King of the Hill and similar shows. And yeah, there's actually a beginning, middle, and an end to most episodes. There's actually a coherent narrative. In fact, my understanding is when talking about making the revival a thing that was going to happen, he actually said, you know what, maybe we should actually try making some good episodes for a change, because he had such disdain for the old stuff that he'd made. Every few years, apparently, he'll talk about getting a new film together or reviving the show again or something like that. And he's said a lot of things about wanting to pick up with the characters as old men and things like that. At one point, he was talking about coming round to the idea of a live-action film with, I think Johnny Depp had expressed interest in starring in it as one of the
Johnny Depp had said he always did Beavis impressions, yeah. But that's the sort of thing that Johnny Depp would do, though. That's the beauty of it. But can we talk quickly about a potential casting for the live-action that they were talking about in the mid-90s? When MTV
was that on the table?
It was on the table. I don't know how quickly it was taken off. Mike Judge was against it at the time, but someone basically.
It's weird, isn't it? Because in the 90s, that was all the rage. People loved a live action version of a cartoon.
Flintstones.
You couldn't talk about making a film of a cartoon without people going, oh, so is it going to be live action or whatever? People were always going on about live action Simpsons movies, and it was. And it strikes me like such a bad idea unless you're doing it for the novelty, like with the Flintstones.
Plus, there was enough of a detachment with the Flintstones. It was 30 years later and get away with that.
Yeah, and it's something that seems to have died off now. I don't think you really get people saying, "Oh, you're gonna." If they announced a Rick and Morty movie tomorrow, you wouldn't have any confusion about it whatsoever. I think everyone would understand. Right, it's going to be an animated Rick and Morty movie. Great. Although, having said that, Archer, the people behind Archer keep talking about the potential for doing a live-action movie, but Archer's a lot more grounded. There's very limited animation. And
well, anyway, like I say, I don't really know how far down the chain this got, but the people who were talked about at the time were Chris Farley as Butthead and David Spade as Beavis.
Oh, jeez. Whoa. He's in the film, isn't he?
Which, David Spade?
Is he not? Has he not got a little cameo? Am I confusing him? David Spade is an uncredited voice in the movie, but I don't know who he played, or it's not much help. He's on IMDb as an uncredited voice, so that might not even be accurate. But if they were talking about him at the time, it would make sense. And yeah, just going back to the revival, it only lasted one season, which is because MTV had changed so much.
But what is even on MTV now?
Well, exactly.
Okay.
It's all reality TV.
There's no music on it anymore. That's
that's
the strange thing.
And apparently Beavis and Butt-Head was like very healthy on there in terms of its ratings. I think it was like the second highest rated thing on the channel like that year. But it didn't test well with their target demographic. Their target demographic had moved from grumpy Gen X kids to teenage girls who watch My Sweet 16.
God.
So they didn't pick it up for another season on the grounds that it just didn't fit their target demographic. And
so interesting.
I think they were shopping it around to other networks very briefly, but then Mike Judge got Silicon Valley off the ground and he's been busy making that ever since. And so I don't know, he said it could still come back again, I guess in a couple of years' time when Silicon Valley wraps up.
Yeah, it sounds like he's quite happy to go back to it every now and then, isn't he? And like I said, he seems to have this idea of going back to it when they're old men in a care home or something. So,
and it's interesting, he does say he's very proud and fond of the characters, and he thinks it's some of the best stuff he's ever done, even though he doesn't like the early stuff. So yeah, I mean, he does seem very willing, like you say, to revisit it, and I think that's cool. I think that's the right attitude to have. That's why not. And that they are such versatile characters as well. They did a little skit introducing, was it the third Jackass movie and things like that? Like, he can just kind of bring them out of retirement just to do little bits and bobs like that.
I saw a clip of them, like they were presenting an award at MTV Music Award, whatever music award, like that sort of thing. So they just drop them into stuff. They've got enough cultural resonance still just to be able to do that. Before we go on the film, can we quickly talk about its connection to South Park?
Yeah.
Because it's obviously an influence. And I don't think South Park would be around without it.
They're big. They certainly were very chummy with Trey Parker and Matt Stone and Mike Judge. Like, I think they were all kind of this clique. Mike Judge voiced Kenny at the end of the South Park movie when he says, "Goodbye, you guys." And Trey Parker's on there's some sort of documentary on one of the DVDs that was made about the making of Beavis and Butt-Head, and it's Trey Parker just sat there going on about how much of an influence it was. And he said it's like the blues in that it's kind of all the same, but that isn't a problem, and you're fine with that. You're fine to just kind of watch the same you said this word that sounds like a rude word over and over and over. And, he's speaking very highly of it when he said it. It's just, yeah.
But it did just, not just in terms of direct influence on them as creators, but it paved the way for South Park to be something that
absolutely
a TV station would go, okay, let's make that. And just in terms of like the crappy animation style, like, it doesn't have to be, neat. It can be rough and ready, and we'll just throw it together.
Oh, that's the thing. You should watch, Calvin, the very early Beavis and Butt-Head shorts. I mean, even the very early episodes are incredibly roughly animated. Like, it's Mike Judge drawing everything, basically, in the first few shorts, just self-animating. So they are...
That's cool.
It is exactly like an animated interstitial that you'll see on a uni TV station. Like, that's the level it's at.
Yeah.
Shall we talk a bit about the film?
Probably should, shouldn't we?
Yes, well, I was holding off. I kept putting us off talking about the film because the film is such of the coup de grace of the whole thing that I feel like it would be, that's what we need to kind of close on. I didn't want to then have to do addendums. So, yeah, the film, Beavis and Butt-Head Do America. We've taken a short format characters that don't seem to have any great substance and put them into a long, feature-length format. How do we make it work?
Calvin, I'm very eager to hear what you make of this, because I think I was trying to get you to watch this for years, going back to uni. And
yes.
It's only just happened. And you're so difficult to gauge with this sort of thing. Like, you could easily... In fact, can I quickly talk about... I'm going to go back to when I first saw this film. It was my first introduction to the characters in any real capacity. I spent the first 20 minutes absolutely infuriated with their I couldn't get over it. It really did my head in. After about 20 minutes, I was used to it. By the end of the film, like, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. I found it funny. But my experience has been, because I then went and bought the DVD and showed this to loads of friends at school, and every last one of them was like fidgeting in their seat, saying, "Oh, for God's sake, they could have just not done this noise every 10 seconds." Every last one of them went through the same experience I had, which was just being like unable to cope, and then just kind of getting used to it and deciding that they loved it by the end of it. And, we'd go to school and be doing the noise and everything. And it is similar to what's going on with Rick and Morty at the minute, actually. That puts a lot of people off when they first watch it, because the dialogue's so improv ready, and they stutter over their words, and they say Morty every other line, Morty, Rick, and Rick burps half his dialogue and just stuff like that. So again, it kind of takes a little bit of getting used to. But anyway, my point is, without someone there to force you to pay attention, I could see it being incredibly abrasive for you. But also, I wouldn't be surprised if you don't like it anyway.
I think, if I can predict, I think Calvin will like everything about this film except Beavis and Butt-Head. Because I think Demi Moore, Bruce Willis, and that whole plot, he'll like. Robert Stack and Cloris Leachman, he'll absolutely love. And the general plot, I think, works really nicely. And I think that is the trick to why this film works. They've created a plot and then just sort of dropped Beavis and Butt-Head in it as almost casual observers, like they're watching a music video. It's like almost like that. Not quite.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get too arty-farty pretentious here, but I think one of the most interesting things about this film is that it is a very rare example of a Western film, a mainstream Western film, in which we have completely passive protagonists, and it works. Yeah. It's not to the detriment of the film. It's one of its strengths.
And no emotional journey either. They're exactly the same at the end as when they start. So anyway, let's Calvin, over to you.
Well, I mean, there was no point in me even really being here because Alan just summed up exactly how I feel about it. It's just kind of crazy. And same with that Soul. Like, I've got in my notes, like, for the first 20 minutes, I was infuriated by all the her, and like they do say the other one's name at the end or start of every sentence. It's like, what do you want to do, Beavis? I don't know, Butthead, what do you want to do? Beavis, should we go to... And that really got on my nerves, except I never came through to love it at the end. I don't know if it's just like Stockholm Syndrome. You just get used to it.
It really is, yeah.
I think you tune it out. I think that's what it is.
You get used to it, you tune it out, and then when it comes to watch the film again, you're like, oh yeah, it's these Beavis and Butt-Head guys that I enjoyed so much last time, and you're just kind of on board with it. And it's also a very fun impression to do at school, so that probably plays into it.
But yeah, it was basically, I mean, my whole pitch coming up is all about Tom Anderson. I really liked the principal, the hippie teacher, Cloris Leachman, Robert Stack, Bruce Willis, and Demi. Every side character I thought was really fun, and that was when I was enjoying it the most. When it's just the scenes with Beavis and Butt-Head, I can't stand it.
There's not a massive deal that's just there.
No. Well, that's the thing. That's why I ended up... Because a lot of it at the start is kind of them, where they're looking for the TV and they're trying to, like... But
that beginning with the TV is essentially an episode that they would have done before.
Yeah.
With no ending. They just sort of would have ended without a TV.
Because, for those people who haven't seen the film, the whole film is about, like, that Beavis and Butt-Head's TV gets stolen, and it's basically them trying to find it and getting caught up in this criminal plot and a lot.
You know what I've just realised? There's a character called Stuart in the series, and he isn't in the film, and I've only just realised that.
Yeah, he's one of the major characters who's not in it, isn't he?
Yeah. Because in the series, their TV would have broken, so they would have gone to Stuart's house, and they would have been watching his TV, and then he would have been like, oh, guys, my mum doesn't want me to watch TV for more than 2 hours a day, or whatever, and they'd be like, oh, shut up, Stuart, and that'd be like the episode, basically. But one thing here, actually, the very opening of the film, you know, like Murphy's Law and Sod's Law and things like that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna submit to you Sol's Law, which is if a film is being made based on a TV series, then it will open on a dream sequence featuring the protagonist of the series in a kind of heightened fantastical reality.
So you're setting it up. You're setting it up as if it's going to be, oh wow, this big budget spectacular film. We've gone to big screen, and then it's like cut it down.
Yeah,
is that the idea?
To an extent, yeah. Partly that, and that's the thing. They're always cut down to the most mundane thing. So in Ali G in the house, he's awoken by a dog licking his testicles after the big shootout action sequence in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. You know, he's dreaming about his first day at this, being promoted, and there's this whole like gun bomb disposal thing with a burger that needs cheese on it. A Goofy movie did it. Pee-wee's Big Adventure did it with him winning the some big bike race. I forget which one it is. Like it's a really commonly done thing. And obviously Beavis and Butt-Head America do it. They open with them as like Godzilla monsters fighting, and then they wake up and they're just on the sofa that we see them in the show. But I think it's partly done just because you want to inject as much cinematic scope and life into the film as you can without betraying the characters. And there's not a great, deal of opportunity to do big, fun animation stuff in something like Beavis and Butt-Head. They find pretty much every avenue available to them to do it.
Well, they find, they really hammer some in, don't they? Yeah.
You've got your trip sequence when they're hallucinating, and it's is it Rob Zombie who did that?
Yeah. The 70s style blaxploitation.
Yeah, the opening credits.
Which is not contextualized whatsoever. They don't even pretend that's a dream or anything. It's just completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
And if we talk about these little things that are dropped in, and there's also that Red Hot Chili Peppers cover of Love Roller Coaster.
Yeah, well, the soundtrack to this film is, I think, phenomenal. I think it's got a brilliant soundtrack, and it's it's mostly songs that were written for the film. So that cover that you just mentioned, for example, isn't just a song they went and plucked. It's, they recorded it specifically for the film. And it blows the original out of the water. It's a great song. But similarly, Walk on Water by Ozzy Osbourne, even that Isaac Hayes blaxploitation opening number at the start is done really well.
Mm.
Basically, all those moments are song moments, and then there's a couple other montage bits where they just basically shove a song over it. And from what I kind of understand, that was a bit of a compromise, where MTV were basically wanted it to be have music videos in it, or have them commenting on music and stuff like that.
Makes
and so that
sense.
was.
It's a really good compromise because it gives you this real. It feels like it's come from this place and it's not turning its back on its origins, but at the same time, it isn't beholden to them. It isn't some nonsense where they're just like commenting on stuff that, happens in front of them every 10 minutes. It's just an organic way of embracing where they've come from. And like I say, I think the selection of music is brilliant in this film. I think it's a really good soundtrack.
And it allows them to play around with the animation. With the obvious example being the hallucination sequence, which goes into a very sort of metal, isn't it?
Yeah, there's got to be a word for that kind of trippy acid trip animation.
But it's like,
or...
but it's not quite. It's not like hippie-ish because it's all. It's like a 1980s
tattoo
hardcore metal album cover. It's like animated girls with big tits or little monsters. Rob Zombie designed most of the things in it, so I mean that'll tell you what. It is. And then it's a White Zombie song on the actual bit.
I don't know about you guys. I really love the animation in this film. It's very basic, but it's done to a very high standard, and it's just very warm, and it makes me long for the days when you'd get that kind of just nice, simple hand-drawn animation in cinemas.
Yeah.
And I think Mike Judge's character design does a hell of a lot for this and his TV shows, just to kind of sell that animation to you, because he's got a very distinct way of drawing these kind of frequently quite grotesque looking human beings, really. But
that's the thing, most of the cast look very normal, but then you got the kind of TV show cast like Mr. Anderson, who looks so much more basic in terms of the animation.
Well, I think that's just because he was one of the earliest characters introduced.
But they've stayed true to that. They've kept it.
It's like when Dr. Marvin Monroe turns up in a modern episode of The Simpsons, and it's like, right, this character design is not. Or when they brought back Santa's Little Helper's owner from the first episode, and they just don't look right at all.
Well, I just want to ask about because Saul, you mentioned that it's a case of passive protagonists that work. For me, it really didn't work, and I'm just curious to know how it worked for you. Is it just that all the stuff going on around them is interesting enough? Because
I think it's because there's a really, I think, quite interesting, engaging, and funny plot happening. It's not just boring, and you're not kind of. It's not like an old Disney princess movie where the character is just whisked along and saved. It's kind of like they keep fucking shit up for themselves and making things worse through dumb luck, or occasionally they'll luck out and it'll go in their favor. But I think because it's done with the futility of life and dumb shit happens attitude, and most of it, like I say, is just them causing chaos. It's not like they're lucking their way into a structured way out of a situation. So it isn't like Deus Ex Machina stuff coming to save them.
There's this plot that's going on that they're kind of apart from, and it all works, it all makes sense, and it all comes to a satisfying conclusion. But their story, they do have their own motivation, like they're trying to get laid, or they've got to go and make this happen, and it's quite passive. But they do have enough of a kind of thing that, why are we going over here, right, for this reason? And it might be a really stupid reason, and just in that moment. Or because he's overdosing on pills and has become Cornholio, so now he's going to wander off over here. So, they have motivation for their own actions, but it's passive to the plot.
Yeah.
I think think that's the thing that I found the most irritating, and maybe it's just something that I have about characters that are this stupid, I guess. It's like, when they miss the bus that is taking them across America, they miss it because they're so fascinated by the automatic urinals.
Yeah.
Like, that just really annoyed me. It's just like, just go and get on the fucking bus. It's like, it really irritated me, and I think I'm all right with stupid characters like this, so long as one of them, in a sort of Laurel and Hardy sort of way, is the one who thinks he's smart. And
that's Butthead, really. Yeah.
I was going to say, no, that is.
Which one's that? Is that the blonde one?
No, that's Beavis.
No, Butthead's the smart one. As in, he's
Butthead's the one who thinks he's the smart one.
Yeah, but he is relatively.
I never got that. I
think Beavis is the one who's got perhaps more kindness and creativity and stuff. So maybe he is stupider, but he'll go further. And
I think that's really interesting that you can pick out those kind of character distinctions. I think maybe if I went back to the film again and rewatched it, I would maybe pick that up. But...
Well, bear in mind I've watched every episode of the TV series as well.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose.
And like Butthead's the one who's like, he'll try and get women, but Beavis doesn't really seem to notice all that. Or not.
Beavis is into that, but it's more of he's almost like a younger brother who's doing it to impress his older brother, Yeah.
That's quite a good way of putting it.
Although saying that, he obviously is like sexually virile, given the love he has of whacking it. Tom Anderson's tool shed.
I did really find that very funny, but I think that was more because of Tom Anderson's reaction to it.
Oh god, yeah, no, I agree. I find it hilarious, and it's purely down to Tom Anderson. There's part of me whenever I watch this who just like wishes it was Hank Hill.
Yeah.
Especially at the start when he's going on about butane.
So who is
regulator.
Who is Tom Anderson in the show? Is he just like a neighbour of theirs with this camper van? Because in the film he's like going on a road trip with is it his wife or mother, or she looked older?
Yeah, is his wife. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
He's just their neighbour, and he was just a regular character. He's in loads of the episodes.
He just occasionally gets annoyed by them whacking off in his tool shed.
He's a bit blind and naive and trusting, and he'll always be like, oh, you two fine young men, you'll help me do this thing, won't you? Oh, I had these two kids these two hooligans caused so much havoc last time, I'm trying to fix this now, and you two can help me out. Like, he'll always kind of never quite recognize them. And I think that there was an episode where I think he hires them to clean the pool or help him install a swimming pool or something, and they end up using tools that strike into the ground, and they think they've struck oil, but it's just a sewage pipe. So they're like filling up dustbins full of sewage and like carting them around his house. Like they would just frequently like destroy his house basically and get away with it, and that was kind of their relationship. And yeah, I mean, I think the film does a great job of just taking his frustrations and his very unfair, like, the way the world just like slaps him repeatedly for no reason to the furthest extreme, to its logical conclusion. He gets such an unfair rap in this film. He seems like a nice guy, and
he's just a good old boy.
Yeah. So, should we talk about Bruce Willis and is it Demi Moore?
Yeah. Were they married at the time?
They were, yeah. Well, they're a warring couple that the boys get ping-ponged between.
And they're very much this film's, right, we can afford a big celebrity star. Who are we going to get?
Cloris Leachman. I was surprised at how much because I knew Bruce Willis was in the film going into it. I was surprised at how good performance he gives for a voice. Like I thought it was really good.
Yeah, he's doing proper character, isn't he?
Yeah. His speaking voice isn't the most rich or entrancing, but I thought here it came off really well. It's like that crusty old guy in that episode of The Simpsons. What's the one where Bart steals that video game and there's that crusty old security guy? That guy, whoever, I can't remember his name. He was in Reservoir Dogs.
The guy hated doing the show.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, apparently he hated it. Apparently he was just a crusty old man who was... Oh, yeah. I need to look up his name now. Sorry, Reservoir Dogs. He was in Reservoir Dogs. I remember that.
Lawrence Tierney?
Lawrence Tierney, that's it. Yeah, him. I remember the showrunners were like terrified of giving him any kind of direction. And he apparently he didn't understand that he was like recording the character like leaving a message on the answer phone, on the Simpsons answer phone, and he didn't quite understand what it was, and he said it was stupid, so they had to like coax him to say the words in a certain way, and then they just put it on the...
Tell you what, the end result in that episode is a fantastic vocal performance from him.
Oh, he's great,
They did a great job of directing his, voice work to say he sounded very difficult.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, going back to Bruce Willis, he really does a good job here, and I think this is Bruce Willis bringing his A game, because, I mean, I don't know if either of you have seen Rugrats Go Wild.
No, I haven't.
It's the third theatrical outing for the Rugrats. The second for the Wild Thornberrys.
Oh, it's that one.
The two crossover on an island and what have you. Well, anyway, Eliza Thornberry, who can speak to animals, speaks to the Rugrats dog Spike, and he's voiced by Bruce Willis.
Ah.
And I mean, just look at that as a comparative piece for that. That's Bruce Willis dialing it in.
Oh, really?
That's
just interesting.
I mean, he's fine in it. He's probably one of the best things in it, other than Tim Curry, who is, as ever, brilliant as Nigel Thornberry. It's just Bruce Willis being Bruce Willis, very standard. And then you look at what he did in this film, and he's really bringing something to the role. He's doing a bit of a voice. He's certainly doing a character. His voice has got a surprising amount of depth and just interesting quality to it. And I think it is quite impressive. To be honest, it's one of my favourite Bruce Willis performances. And I really like Bruce Willis, so yeah. There's a lot of nice little nods to animation at the time, dotted in throughout the film. There's the big Beauty and the Beast moment when they're dancing to... Yeah,
I did quite like that. That was their big CG moment. Like,
I did like that though. It's such a nicely done little parody, because it's you wouldn't watch that and think, what the hell was that, if you didn't know what Beauty and the Beast was, if you didn't get it. But at the same time, it's kind of like it's almost just this middle finger to Beauty and the Beast, like, yeah, we can do that too. Look, our characters are dancing, whatever. Then I guess there's the whole subplot with the virus thing that's being carted across the country. It's perfect, really, isn't it? It's so hard to take characters like this and give them a movie that is big in scope without betraying the character and the scope of the show. And we spoke about this in our The Office episode, and probably in our Absolutely Fabulous episode. I think we talk about how Alpha Papa did a great job of doing it for Alan Partridge, and other examples like that. And I think this film is a great example of hitting that line, really, getting it just right. Because I mean, it's a doomsday scenario. Frankly, this virus they're carrying could be like apocalyptic in scale if it gets out, but it's not sci-fi to the point that it's unbelievable, and it's all done at a very mundane level.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just a MacGuffin, really, at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
What works about that whole side plot is that because the film's only 80 minutes long, and you've got all the Beavis and Butt-Head stuff, that whole plot is maybe 40 minutes at most. And so it's really boiled down to its basics. Look, here's the thing. Here's a cop chasing them. Here's a moment. Here's the conclusion. And so it just comes together really nicely. But it's so by the numbers, we all understand all these moments that are happening. And it doesn't cheapen it. It just makes it come together really nicely.
And the characters do a huge amount to carry it through without just feeling very mundane and boring. Robert Stack, for example, he is wonderful.
But that character is bordering on parody, and that's why it works on this format, because we're seeing almost like a parody of that plot within this story because it's so quick.
I mean, what future looking forward? Do you think they ever will give us another offering of Beavis and Butt-Head in any capacity? How likely do you think it is that it'll...
I think its time has passed.
Well, I don't know, because I think the fact that it played so well, for example, in 2011 when they did the remake, as it had nearly 20 years earlier, there's nothing about Beavis and Butt-Head that really dates them. You can watch that film from 1995 and it doesn't feel like, oh God, this is like you watch, for example, Bill and Ted. That's a very kind of... Well, an 80s, 90s stoner dude, and Beavis and Butt-Head are kind of from that, but then they become something else. They don't feel dated, they don't feel fixed in a particular time, and I think that's perhaps why they have sort of lasted as long as they have.
I don't know, I think they do feel fixed in a particular time. I think it is very much a Gen X, MTV, early 90s thing, and that's fine. I think it's fine if it is... period piece like that. I just don't think that whatever the equivalent of Gen X is in this day and age is going to resonate with these characters. I think something like Rick and Morty is probably more,
Oh, yeah. I certainly can't envision a world in which Beavis and Butt-Head are going to be a big enough draw to get enough people to go and see a film in the cinema that they, that would have in the 90s. I think that's partly just, hand-drawn animation isn't what it used to be in terms of appealing to people as well. At the same time, the landscape's completely different and you don't need as big an audience to make stuff anymore for it to be viable, and I wouldn't be surprised if Netflix thought it was in their interest to produce a Beavis and Butt-Head movie or something like that. So
yeah, if you can do it relatively
or just a revival
cheaply.
of the show. Well, that's the thing. I don't think it would cost very much to produce. You don't put Bruce Willis in it. That's half your budget saved. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if the show comes back or something. I think they'll keep coming back for like skits and specials, but it's just if they ever do something more substantial. I think when Silicon Valley ends, it'll be interesting to see, because Mike Judge is probably going to just have free reign to kind of make anything he wants, and he might just want to do more live action stuff with HBO. He might want to do something else. Have either of you guys seen Silicon Valley, actually, just on a tangent?
No, I don't think I've seen any other of Mike Judge's work, except I saw well, I'm not sure how much involvement he had in it. I saw Nerdland on Netflix.
Oh, it's not meant to be great, is it?
No,
is
he's
he
not
involved
great,
in that at all?
He's a voice for sure. I'm not sure. And I know that him and Chris Prynoski are mates. Chris Prynoski directed the psychedelic sequence in Beavis and Butt-Head, and he directed Nerdland. Okay. So I'm guessing they're mates, and I don't know what his involvement was, but yeah. But there were funny bits in it.
He has a weird filmography when it comes to acting, Mike Judge. Like he's in the what are those Robert Rodriguez Spy Kids? He's in all the Spy Kids movies.
No way!
Like,
seriously?
Yeah, he's like
God.
the head of the spy organization or something, and he's just playing it as he's not doing a silly voice or anything. It's really weird. I don't know why. And that R.I.P.D. film a few years ago?
Yes.
It was kind of like Men in Black.
Yeah.
Mike Judge was the voice of all the monsters and ghosts and things. They just hired him to do like blah, blah, noises. So he's got a very weird filmography with that regard. I mean, I don't know. I think Beavis and Butt-Head's quite a diamond in the rough. Certainly the film. I think the film's wonderful. I think King of the Hill is absolutely excellent. Just to say, we'll probably never do an episode on King of the Hill. It's one of the most remarkably consistent pieces of television ever made.
And it did just trundle on for years and years, and it kind of
13 seasons, never skipped a beat.
It was just enough ratings to get being made, but it wasn't this huge deal, and it kind of just bubbled under for many years.
Yeah,
like it blew up straight away, and then just kept going, didn't it? It was consistent.
And that's the thing. Season 1 is about as good as season 13. In fact, season 13, if anything, was one of the best seasons. But it like I say, it never missed a beat, that show. It was just wonderful from start to finish. And I mean, I think it was doing quite healthy ratings when it got cancelled. It's just that Fox were quite keen to bring in yet another Seth MacFarlane show, and I think they really shot themselves in the foot, and their animation block kind of fell apart shortly afterwards. But yeah, and he did Office Space, if you guys have seen that.
I've never seen it, but it's been on my list for a while.
Yeah.
It's all right. I can see why people gravitate towards it. That was based on some it's similar origins to Beavis and Butt-Head, actually. He just did little short animations of the guy in it who's played by Stephen Root in the film. And Idiocracy, I'll save that because there is a possibility I'll pick that out for us to do an episode on one day. I'll save that one. It's good, that film. Extract, worth skipping because that's not great. And then Silicon Valley, which is one of the best things on television at the moment, and I really can't recommend it enough. I don't know, I hope they do some more stuff with Beavis and Butt-Head down the line, but who knows? How would we if Mike Judge came to us and he said, "Guys, I want to do this, but I'm totally out of ideas. I'm just too busy on Silicon Valley. I can't think up an idea, so I need you guys to think it up for me." What would you pitch to him? Shall I go first?
Okay.
To be honest, what I would love is just a follow-up film. Just a straight sequel, just another adventure for Beavis and Butt-Head, pretty much exactly like the first one. And yeah, so just another adventure where they're completely passive protagonists who get sort of sucked into a much larger plot and pulls them on a road trip, because I think this sort of thing really does need to be a road trip, really. I figure the logical thing, and it's not a particularly clever idea, is just Beavis and Butt-Head do Europe. They go abroad and just end up getting into all sorts of opportunity for jokes, interacting with, snooty French people and that sort of thing. But it's really difficult to figure out a grounded idea that would kind of be big enough and work. I mean, I really struggled with this. I came up with all sorts of things I'd love to see, but they'd completely betray the tone of it all. So that's stuff like, Beavis and Butt-Head go to Jurassic Park, for example, would be amazing, but it wouldn't be in keeping with the show. Or a remake of Idiocracy where Hank Hill is sent forward into the future and everyone is literally Beavis and Butt-Head. Or Beavis and Butt-Head wind up in a terrorist hostage situation, but Alpha Papa did it, so I don't think they can really do that. So yeah, like I say, they end up going to Europe. I'd have them watching TV and they see that Metallica or AC/DC or someone like that, they're doing a world tour and they think it'll be cool to go and see them play in Highland, because they can, pick up chicks and stuff while they're there. And one thing leads to another. Let's say the roadies there are like busted on drug offences, or Beavis and Butt-Head somehow, get them into trouble by mistake. And for whatever reason, they ended up getting drafted in as the new roadies to help them on the tour. Okay. Yeah. So that's your reason for why they're going across Europe, why they're going from place to place. And then, I don't know, when they get to Berlin or something, you need something big to happen. So that's where I was struggling, really.
They'd need to get to Amsterdam, surely. Like, that'd be the...
Oh, yeah. That'd be great.
Red light district drugs.
But that's the sort of thing... I mean, when Berlin is just where I picked out for the plot to really kick into gear. It doesn't have to be Berlin. It could be anywhere. Amsterdam, that's where they, like... That's like when they stop off at Vegas at the start of the film. Yes. And I don't know, all I could really think of was, again, like, terrorist hostage situation, but you're either going to get too close to Alpha Papa, or
Airheads.
You're going to go into...
Real life?
Yeah, or that's it, you're going to go into, like, Islamic terrorist route, which might be a bit too touchy a subject.
They get a mention in my pitch, don't worry.
Okay.
In mine too, oddly enough.
I haven't really figured it out beyond that, because I couldn't think of anything that I felt was good enough. But, I mean, that's the bulk of it. I think just have them thrown into a bigger plot again. Just do the same thing again.
But in Europe?
Diminishing Returns.
Do you want to hear my pitch?
Yes, please.
Yay.
Okay, because I love Tom Anderson, and now that, Sol, you connected the dots with Hank Hill, I think I'm going to have to go and watch King of the Hill, because I...
Oh, yeah, I think you'll like King of the Hill.
Oh, yeah.
If you give it a chance. I mean, not only is it a great show, and I really, really highly recommend it. Like I say, it's 200 episodes plus, 13 seasons that never missed a beat. It's the most consistently good thing I can think of. It's just so... It's like The Simpsons' first 2 seasons. It's that sort of grounded, not very cartoony. To be perfectly frank, there's no reason for the whole thing to be animated other than why the hell not, and other than you get Mike Judge's caricatures on people. Hank Hill is such a great, well-observed character. Peggy, his wife, is brilliant.
You will actually love that. I hadn't really connected it, but you will love it, because Hank's really neurotic. Like, he's a really neurotic character, but in a very kind of, I'm the man of the family, I need to present a certain type of Texas man kind of way.
He's very well observed. He's a 3-dimensional Tom Anderson, frankly.
Except it's 2-dimensional.
Yeah. And he makes propane funny. That's the other thing. You won't be able to hear the word propane without laughing after you watch
What is propane?
It's a gas. Well, liquid.
Oh, is it like what you put on
fuel.
barbecues?
Yeah.
Look, Hank Hill is a propane salesman. That's his job. So he's always going on about propane and the benefits of propane over charcoal and how it's the best thing to cook your meat on. There's one episode where Bobby joins an improv class and Hank hates all the improv comedy, but then Bobby starts doing propane themed improv comedy and Hank loves it and they're able to bond they become the propaniacs and do a tour of the propane business circuit as these doing these very specific jokes about butane and charcoal and policemen pulling them over and because they've not got adequate fuel and just stuff that doesn't make any sense at all. And then
I'm gonna have to watch King of the Hill again. It
is brilliant. And you've got Dale Gribble and all these other characters propping them up. It's very good. You'll love Peggy Hill though as well, Calvin.
Is that his wife?
Yeah, but she's a really well observed
she's
character.
like the Texas champion of Boggle, stuff like that.
Yeah. So you should watch it. It's good.
So my pitch is just a synopsis of it is I just want a Tom Anderson movie and Tom Anderson and his wife driving
Mr.
around
Anderson.
the US. But I want them to have a specific objective, which is that obviously they're quite right wing and probably would vote Republican. So I want the film to be set during the previous presidential election, and him and his wife.
You know what? It's such a shame King of the Hill isn't on the air now because I would love to see them address Donald Trump.
Yes,
because that is exactly the sort of Hank Hill's like a Ronald Reagan Republican, you know, he like a I Like Ike in the movie with Tom Anderson. But he would not like Trump. And there'd be a real conflict there with
Well, in my film, Tom Anderson and his wife, they want to go to one of the Trump talks, like the rallies that, he does, and they really want to be in the audience, but for whatever reason, they're constantly getting foiled in their attempts to get there. Maybe it could even be Beavis and Butt-Head who are just foiling every attempt. So it is a road trip film of them following Trump around America, trying to get into one of his rallies just to watch and be supportive, but they are foiled every step of the way along the journey. Anyway, that's kind of it for my pitch.
What sort of scrapes could they get into?
Well, I was going to ask.
You could have it they go into different states, and so you have different things for what the state is famous for. So,
they can go to Gay Pride in San Francisco.
They wouldn't like that.
Can they on the way out? Can they pass through Arlen and run into? He needs to top up the butane in his tank, and there's this pushy propane salesman, and they don't get along at all, but they're almost identical.
Definitely.
All right, shall I do my pitch?
Yeah, go on then.
Okay, my film is also a road trip kind of film. My film is called Sol and Calvin Do America.
Oh, God.
So we could start, with our two plucky young leads sat on the settee, but they'd be watching a film rather than music videos and maybe making comments on it. I don't know what sort of
Calvin.
Yeah, Sol.
This film sucks.
Yeah.
Something like that. Anyway, so
we don't need we can just do.
Right, okay. So Sol decides he wants to visit America so that he can find the grave of George A. Romero and try and reanimate him with some sort of Necronomicon thing or something.
Bearing in mind, at time of recording, George A. Romero died last night, so presumably
less than 24 hours. Body's not even cold yet.
Presumably, if you hadn't thought of it this afternoon, this could have been going to see the grave of Roger Moore or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I would have made it work. But this is the George A. Romero memorial episode, so come tune in next week for the Martin Landau memorial episode.
Oh.
So
Tune in next week for the Chevy Chase
Oh,
episode.
that's a prediction. Oh my god, if he actually dies now. So, yeah, he wants to go and find the grave of George A. Romero to try and turn him into a zombie. Now, Calvin isn't keen on this idea particularly until he hears that, for some reason, George A. Romero has been interred in South Dakota. Now, what is the only interesting thing in South Dakota?
You sure is that... Have you looked this up?
No. Well, I don't think he's been buried yet. I don't know,
I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being buried in Canada, you know?
Well, I don't know.
Is he Canadian?
He's become a Canadian citizen. He's got joint citizenship. He lives there now. Well, lived there.
No, my South Dakota connection is purely to make Calvin agree to go. Because, Calvin, what...
It'll be Canada or Pittsburgh, one of those two.
Calvin, what is in South Dakota? What's the only interesting thing about South Dakota?
Mount Rushmore.
Mount Rushmore. There you go. So,
Are you going to make this? Are you going to tie this into Martin Landau as well?
no.
Oh right, I thought you were going to go down a North by Northwest route.
Well, no, I'm just doing a couple of references to films. That's all. It's not really.
Oh right. Oh, okay.
But we can hammer Martin Landau in there if you want. Calvin wants to visit Mount Rushmore because of North by Northwest. So we follow
Martin Landau. Let's go for some chocolate frosted milkshakes. That was him, right?
Well, that doesn't sound like Martin Landau.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't know what that is.
Wasn't Homer Simpson based on? No, Walter Matthau. Walter Matthau. That's the one. I was gonna say that didn't make sense in my head. Come on, boy. Let's go for some chocolate frosted milkshakes. Oh, there's propane and Ladybird, stop eating that propane, dang it, Bobby.
Okay.
Oh God.
All right.
It's the cartoon All Stars episode.
Oh, no.
Right. Okay.
Did you ever see that cartoon All Stars thing they did in the 90s to say no to drugs?
Yeah,
where they
that's
got,
amazing.
Garfield and Bugs Bunny and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and George Bush Senior.
My favourite thing is that they got George C. Scott to voice the villainous cloud of smoke that encouraged the young boy to do marijuana.
Oh God!
And then Winnie the Pooh and Bugs Bunny come out to be like, "Don't do marijuana, Jonathan," or whatever his name is. And he's like, "Oh, all right then, yeah." As if any 14-year-old who's gonna think about doing drugs would watch that and think, you know what? All right, no, not gonna do it.
Yeah,
well, Bugs Bunny.
If Winnie the Pooh says so. Then,
anyway,
yeah.
Right. Okay. So. This is a road trip across America, and we follow Saul and Calvin. And in keeping with the Beavis and Butt-Head theme, they're going to find themselves caught up in international intrigue without even being aware of it. Now, this all starts when they arrive at New York. They go visit the Statue of Liberty.
So we get through airport security okay. Calvin hasn't packed his replica man with a golden gun or anything like that.
Oh, that's a lovely little moment we can put in. There you go. And we have a little moment at the airport. Throw in anything you like. It's like Beavis and Butt-Head. It's just a series of sketches, really. It's just we'll throw it together. So they go to the Statue of Liberty, and they're at the museum, and it celebrates the ideals of what the Statue of Liberty was, and it represents what the immigrants saw when they were coming across, and all that immigration in the late sort of 19th century, and that's what it's all about. But Calvin is feeling a bit uneasy about all this immigration talk. He doesn't like it, so so Saul tries to cheer him up by reenacting scenes from films that involve the Statue of Liberty.
Come on, boy, let's go to the Statue of Liberty. Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah, I've got
Saboteur.
That. So I've got Planet of the Apes. You've got to do that bit, and then X-Men.
Yes.
Pretend he's Magneto.
Men in Black 2.
What happens in that?
That classic. At the end, they wipe everyone. They neuralize their memory with the thing in the Statue of Liberty is a giant neuralizer.
Saboteur, exactly. Saboteur.
What happens in Saboteur?
The Hitchcock film at the end.
What's the Statue of Liberty bit?
Well, they end up on top of it, and then the hero has to save the villain to try and clear his name, and then the villain falls to his death.
Happens a lot in Hitchcock films.
Yeah.
Okay, so then Saul, he does Ghostbusters 2. He pretends he's stomping around New York and stamping on people as if they're mice. And then one of the locals, notices this and thinks, I think this is a terrorist threat. Right, because He's talking about destroying New York. And so he reports it to the police. Now, the policeman, he sees them. He's a little suspicious of Saul because he's got, he's a bit well-tanned, dark hair, all that sort of thing. But then he sees he's with Calvin, who is, whiter than white. He is the whitest man in the world. And so thinks, oh, that's fine. They can't possibly be terrorists because we know white people aren't terrorists. That's a fact in America. So he decides, unless they're Irish, he decides to leave them. He decides to leave them be, but then he just as he's leaving, he has this sudden memory. He goes to his little file of the FBI's most wanted or whatever. And would you believe it? It turns out that Saul is a dead ringer for an infamous Mexican bandido who has recently escaped from jail. So basically the main body of the film is the police chasing Sol and Calvin and just missing them at every turn as they visit famous American landmarks. So, we can do the tour of like historical film hotspots. I thought they could do a bungee jump off the Hoover Dam. Thought that could be a good moment. What else? James Bond's been all over America. What else could he do?
Wait, so when we're doing the Hoover Dam, Calvin will be doing all that stuff, and I'll just be quoting Beavis and Butt-Head do America.
Exactly.
Is this a goddamn?
We could go to Louisiana and get into a car with a redneck sheriff.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, they could get picked up by the local police, but he doesn't realise that they're wanted, and then the FBI turn up and they throw him out or something.
So I assume at some point we go to Hollywood.
Not exactly.
Peak meta.
Not quite. I
don't think I'd go to America without going down, visiting the Chinese theatre and looking at all the stars. Look, yeah. Calvin, it's Jimmy Stewart's hands. Oh, Jimmy Stewart. I love Jimmy Stewart's hands.
Oh, look how small his hands are.
Oh, I'm going to put my hands in his hands and see who's got the biggest hands.
Take a picture.
Oh, I'll get a picture. Oh, look, Calvin, it's Jack Sparrow. He's coming over for a photo. Oh, hello, it's me, Jack Sparrow. Oh, Sol, I'm scared. Let's go home.
Apparently one of those guys, there was a Freddy Krueger who apparently, there's some guy had a photo with him and he didn't pay him money or something, so he slashed him with his razor hands and got arrested.
I shouldn't be laughing. All right, well,
it's funny.
So we don't visit Hollywood.
I hadn't incorporated that, but we can put it in. It's not a problem. But for the plot purposes, the next stage is just when the police look like they're going to get them, they sort of catch up with them. They overhear something Calvin says about the whole going to South Dakota, digging up George Romero thing, but they don't quite get the full information. And they think they're going there to meet like the Mr. Big, right? Like the next step up in the chain. So now they're like, right, we'll just follow them. And we'll follow them to the next kind of guy and we'll work upwards. So then they do eventually make it to South Dakota. They dig up George A. Romero's corpse. They eventually make it to George A. Romero's grave. They dig up his corpse. And then we have the whole Weekend at Bernie's style bit of the film where they have to pass him off as their...
my favourite.
He's like their Uncle George and they have to stop off and take him into diners and all that other sort of quaint Americana. And the police don't realise he's a corpse because the police are watching them. So now they're following all three of them in the belief that they're going to lead them to like the head man of this criminal operation that they
have. Either of you seen Weekend at Bernie's 2?
No,
not 2. I don't think.
They actually do a voodoo spell and turn the corpse into a zombie. It actually has a zombie in it.
Oh my god!
I might make us do that film on this podcast at some point. Like I think it's brilliant. Well, no, it's so bad it's good. It's one of those anyway.
Okay, so. Now, where they're actually heading now on their road trip is they're going to Seattle, where they intend to gatecrash the filming of a new feature film version of Frasier. Now, they arrive at the filming location and they manage to get on set because Calvin puts on a wig and pretends to be Jane Leaves. And then they convince the security guard that the corpse of George A. Romero is actually John Mahoney, who's had too much to drink at lunch and is now unconscious.
Who's Frasier's dad in the thing? Who's still alive and not that old. But,
he's the same age as George A. Romero, actually, I think.
Oh shit!
I think.
I hope they do get on with that Frasier movie sometime soon.
Yeah, he's well into his 70s. Could you do a convincing Jane Leaves?
Oh, hello, I'm Daphne Moon. I can see in the future, you know.
Now, once on set, they immediately cause chaos because the new dog that is playing the dog jumps up and grabs the arm of George A. Romero and rips it off and then runs away to sort of gnaw at it, like dogs do. And so the furious Kelsey Grammer, he realises that they're imposters. He attempts to apprehend them, but as he rushes towards them, he accidentally stands on a rake that someone has left lying around. Or he could possibly fall off a stage. That works just as well. Now, our boys, they're big fans of Fraser, so they rush to help him. Right at this moment, the police storm in and arrest everyone. Now, they're under the impression that Kelsey Grammer is the head of an international criminal organisation, so they drag him away for questioning. Sol and Calvin are bundled into a police van, and it looks as though they'll be going to end up in Guantanamo or somewhere. And then the van suddenly stops at an airport. The distinctly Hispanic-looking policeman who is driving the van releases them, and it turns out he's still under the impression that Saul is the infamous Mexican bandito. And he explains that he is a member of the gang and he's gone undercover as a police officer to help out the organisation from the inside. So Saul obviously has to put on a bad Mexican accent to kind of say thanks, and the guy gives fake passports and tickets for a plane to Mexico City, thus setting up our sequel, Saul and Calvin, Dia de los Muertos. So that will be a whole different sequel. So Saul and Calvin do Mexico.
Well, I hope to hear that someday, perhaps when we do our Machete episode.
Do you think we can get enough listeners to the point that we can launch a Kickstarter campaign to make Diminishing Returns the movie? And then just basically make that.
Can we afford Kelsey Grammer? We might have to go with Gary Chalk.
As a stretch goal.
The unofficial mascot of Diminishing Returns.
No, let's get Michael Gross.
Oh, yeah.
Michael Gross.
I forgot about Michael Gross. I forgot we liked him. Can we? Okay, so if we're doing the film, I want to be played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Calvin, who do you want to play you?
Oh, Zac Efron. And Saul can be Danny Trejo.
We can't afford Kelsey Grammer, but we can afford Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Yeah, but
Dwayne "The Rock" the President Johnson.
He does it for the love, you see. If you give it's a good enough script, he'll do it. In fact, he's going to pay for it. That's the beauty of it. He's executive producer.
Oh, God. Danny Trejo.
Is that the only Mexican you could think of?
Might as well be Cheech Marin. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. There we go.
Hey, Calvin. Hey, let's go to Mexico, man.
Or old Charlton Heston. He played a Mexican.
Right. Well, as always, thank you for listening. And do come back next week as we return to the whole tying films in with upcoming theatrical releases shtick that we do. I mean, what's out next week? Hang on. Just 1 second, guys. Hello? Someone there? Hello?
Beep, beep. Hide.
Do you mind? I'm in the middle of recording an outro for the podcast at the minute. Are you trying to make me sound stupid in front of the listeners?
Don't need any help from me, sir.
Oh, are you a listener?
I suppose not.
Well, basically, it's a show where we talk about films and pitch our own ideas for the sequel. There's 3 of us. Calvin's a James Bond fan.
Girly boy. You're too old. You're all too old.
No, Alan's the old one. Then there's myself. Let's see how to sum me up. Alan likes to do jokes about how I barely have contact with my father.
Very wise of you, Dad. Very wise indeed.
Oh, well, that's a bit uncalled for. I don't know. How would you sum me up then?
Such a perfect specimen of manhood.
Kiss me, fat boy.
No, get off! What is this? Are you negging me? You still haven't told me who you are.
I'm every nightmare you ever had. I am your worst dream come true. I'm everything you ever were afraid of.
No, that's not true. We did an episode where Alan told us about the time he got stuck hiding naked in a cupboard with a raging erection. I can't open the cupboard at night now for fear that he'll be standing there staring me in the face from down below.
You know that television makes one look terribly roly-poly. You may not recognize me.
Go on.
This is Sir Nigel Thornberry.
Oh, Japanese Nigel Thornberry?
I'm not Japanese!
Oh, sorry. So let me get this straight. We mentioned you in the episode, so now you're here to bridge the gap between this week's episode and next week's episode. Is that right?
Anything can happen on Halloween. Your dog could turn into a cat.
Oh, right. Well, I hate to tell you this, but we're not actually doing it as our Halloween special this year. It's just a regular episode we're dropping in with all the other ones.
Oh, come on, bucko.
No, sorry. Look, right, I need you to go. I'm still recording.
Go? Without this, I'll kill you all.
That's Harris all over.